Hello, my name is Angela Schumann and I am the Shakespeare Whisperer, and this is Dr. Peter Groves, and we are continuing our series on Measure for Measure.
Our series for analysis of Measure for
Yes, yes, that is exactly right. We're not performing Measure for Measure. So we continue with Act 3, Scene 1. We're up to line 159 in my edition.
And 150 in my edition, but the reason for those discrepancies is that prose never lineates the same way. It depends on the size of the font and the width of the page and all sorts of things. So it's only lines that are going to give you accurate line numbers, and only lines of verse.
Yes.
So we've just finished this rather tense, shall we say, interview between
Yeah, right.
where she's ended up, beating him up, basically, knocking him about, and about to end in a huff. 'Tis best that thou diest quickly. And she's intercepted by the Duke, who's been lurking in the shadows. He's a bit of a lurker, isn't he, the Duke?
He's a massive lurker. The Duke in Dark Corners.
Yes, that's right. Sort of emotional vampire. Now, if I can just say one word about this, I think this is a kind of watershed in the play, because you'll notice we suddenly shift into prose, and it's perfectly good prose, it's lovely prose, but the intensity, the emotional temperature has suddenly shot right down. I used to think, and I'm not sure if I still think this, that a lot of the middle part of the play isn't quite finished. If Shakespeare sort of hasn't quite turned it into verse. I mean, I don't know if I really believe that now, but it is quite striking. It's because there are three absolutely crucial scenes here. The first two, the first scene between Angelo and Isabella, 2-4, the second scene, and then of course Angelo, Isabella and Claudio in 3-1. And it's as though there's less dramatic urgency in the play as it proceeds from here. I'm not saying it's not a great play. I'm just saying that it has its peaks and its highs and its lows. And lows, I don't really mean lows either.
I know what you mean.
Tension and relaxation.
Yeah.
How about something like that?
Yeah.
So all of a sudden we're back in the what somebody called the cooler medium of prose.
And if you're wondering, how do I tell whether it's verse or prose? Here's an easy trick. If it's in verse, the first word of every line will start with a capital letter. If it's in prose, it won't. You'll only get capital letters at the start of sentences. That's the easiest, simplest way to tell. And that's actually why our line numbers will be different, because depending on the size of your font, as we know with prose, like a normal novel or something, you'll be able to fit a different amount of words on pages than I will. So what might take 6 lines to be said in my play might take 8 lines to be said in yours, so that pushes everything slightly off. Exactly.
So the Duke intervened at this point. Fetch if you were young sister, but one word. What is your will, she says. I wouldn't make a lot of this, but it's interesting that, of course, will is a very famous little pun in Shakespeare. It means sexual desire, among other things, and Shakespeare puns on that in the sonnets, his own name, Thou hast, when thou hast thy
love
will.
The fact that is his
Yeah.
name.
Oh, yes.
He loves a good dirty joke.
That's
He
right.
really enjoy that.
But with the Duke, it's actually quite appropriate in a sense. But you see how the language has changed. It's become very kind of almost kind of leisurely. Might you dispense with your leisure? I wouldn't mind if I have some speech with you. There's a satisfaction I would require is likewise your own benefit. It's very elegant prose, but it's not as highly charged and as passionate as we've just been witnessing, which of course is appropriate. These two are basically strangers. So basically he says he wants a word with her, and she says that she really hasn't got the time because she's very busy. I'm not quite sure with what, but but I will attend you a while, she says. And she waits behind, and then he
I
addresses.
keep forgetting because it says Duke. I keep forgetting he's dressed as a friar.
Oh,
I'm like, you
yes.
speak to the monarch like that? But
That's
yeah.
right. That's right. Yes, exactly. And then he addresses Claudio and tells him a bunch of fibs.
Oh, hang on. First, son, I have overheard what hath passed between you and your sister.
Oh, yeah.
You just can't help
No,
your little self,
that's
can
it.
you?
He's a lurker.
You spying,
That's right.
lurking, nosy
Exactly.
little sticky beat.
And you remember that Lucio calls him the Duke of Dark Corners.
Yeah.
It's a very appropriate epithet for him.
And at no point does he feel slightly awkward about
No.
that. Like, I did overhear that, guys. Sounded pretty personal, but
Yeah.
no.
That's
He's just
right.
so happy to stick his nose in where it doesn't belong.
It's actually quite interesting. People often talk about Hamlet as a play, again, very contemporary information, as a play about surveillance. Everybody is spying on everybody and hiding behind curtains and listening in and sending spies, you know. Polonius even spies on his own son in Paris. He sends off Rinaldo to check up on him. But there's a lot of spying going on in this play, except it's all the one man, it's all the Duke spying on people.
Yeah.
And of course, this has a contemporary relevance because Elizabeth's state was very much a surveillance state, partly because of her fear of Catholic plotting and so on. There had been several Catholic plots, and of course there was another to come around about the time of this play, shortly afterward, with the gunpowder plot. But here it's all the Duke who's doing this spying and so on. And I've said before that in some respects this Duke is a sort of slightly mocking, what should we say, a kind of representation of James I. Hey,
Not
Dick.
super flattering.
No, not so flattering, exactly. So he spins a bunch of, fibs, let's say, lies to Angelo. Never had the purpose to corrupt her, only hath made an essay of her virtue, to practice his judgment with the disposition of natures. So, and he goes on to say, well, not that he
So it
doesn't
was
just
just
lie.
a test.
Just a
Andrew was
test.
just testing her.
Yes, exactly.
Did you enjoy it?
And he's given to this little test, so he doesn't think there's anything wrong with this. And then, to compound this, he says, I am confessor to Angelo, and I know this to be true. Which
I
is,
think it is so problematic because if you really were a confessor, you would be bound by the seal
Yes.
of confession to not reveal anything that had been confessed to you.
Exactly.
And any Catholic would know this.
Yes.
And this is set in a Catholic setting.
Exactly. And exactly. It's almost as though he doesn't know that. He's so unacquainted with the technicalities. Because he also says the same about Mariana to somebody else, doesn't he?
I have confessed her and I know
Yes,
her virtue.
that's right. Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. The whole mechanism of confession requires that. Oh, well, of course. And we've seen this before in the little scene with Juliet. He's not in the least abashed at confessing her in the presence of the prior.
Yeah.
So many kinds of wrong there, basically.
And it's not like he just has a general... like, I find some personalities seem to just have no sense of privacy
Yes.
for anybody,
Or
themselves
boundaries.
or others. Yeah, they'll just tell you everything about themselves and share everything about everyone else that's all on the table. Whereas he isn't. I'm just trying to think, is he one of those people, or does he protect his own privacy and his own secrets?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, the point is, if it's true that Lucio has more insight into him than he has into himself,
Yeah.
and that he doesn't want to recognise his own lechery, if you like, and his own meddling, because we see the meddling that Lucio talks about. So, and actually, meddling is the word he uses, and meddling. I don't sound as though Elizabethans were always sex obsessed, but meddling also means sexually interfering with in the period. There's a joke about a meddler in Romeo and Juliet, which is a kind of overripe fruit. We won't go into that, but so.
I think it's in this as well.
Is it? Oh, right.
He was going to marry me to a rotten meddler or
Oh,
something.
yes. Well done, yeah. Excellent. He's made an essay of her virtue. It's nice that's the same word, isn't it, that is used by Claudio of Angelo. Let her make essay of him. trial. And when you assay something, you're basically weighing the metal against the known volume to see, or comparing weight and volume to see if it's true gold. Is it the real gold, or is it dodgy mixed with something else? And he goes on to say, therefore prepare yourself to death. This is his comforter. This is his. He knows this isn't true. He knows he's going to save Claudio, but he insists on him suffering this anxiety of dying in the morning.
Which is really just sadistic.
Sadistic, yes, because he doesn't have to do this. I mean, maybe he doesn't tell him it's okay because he's afraid he might spill the beans or something, but he doesn't have to kind of relish it and rub it in.
Or, I'm a little foggy on the plot actually. Does he think that Claudio might actually die? Like,
oh no.
Save him if I can.
Oh no. But well, because he's the Duke, he wouldn't entertain for a moment the idea that he wasn't infallible. All he has to do is rip off his clothes, like Superman.
Okay, so he knows.
Yeah.
So he could have just whispered to Claudio on the quiet, like, don't worry.
Yeah,
I'm the Duke, I'm gonna
that's right.
save
But
you.
keep it under your hat. Don't tell anybody.
Yeah.
But he's such a
He could
control.
have told Isabella and Claudio
he
and
could.
Juliet. He could have consoled them all and be like, guys, I've got you, don't worry.
He could.
No one's going to die, just play along with me.
Yes.
Join me in this exposure of Angelo.
Exactly. And there are other Shakespeare characters who do things a bit like that. But he's a control freak. He can't.
And this is one of the ways in which this is so much darker than other comedies, where everyone's kind of in on it.
That's right. Exactly. So both Claudio and Isabella go through a lot of suffering, and quite unnecessary suffering, which he's solely the cause of. So Claudio...
Just to make him look better as well. It's a kind of psychopathic thing to do. Like, oh, I'll go and like slash the tires of your car, and then I can save you, and you'll love me.
That's
like,
right.
I can help you. Like, it's that kind of reasoning.
Yes, exactly.
Quite
And
disturbing.
I know, and he thinks that Isabella will fall in love with him because of this, and want to marry him. Yeah. What can one say? So Claudio, he's quite repentant for having upset Isabella. Let me ask my sister pardon. I'm so out of love with life, and I will sue you to be rid of it. Hold you there, he says. In other words, keep that thought. Just as he says to Juliet, there, rest. Same idea,
Yeah.
Brood on the idea that your husband is about to be murdered, judicially murdered. And then he has a little chat with the provost. We can scoot over parts of this a little more expeditiously because it's not as dense.
Well, except for line 185 when he turns to Isabella, he says, "The hand that hath made you fair hath made you good."
Yes.
And it's like, fair means like beautiful, attractive.
Yes.
She's a hottie. So like, he's like old enough to be her father. He's dressed as a friar, and he thinks it's appropriate as like she's losing her brother and all this is going on to be like gorgeous.
Exactly.
You're such a hottie on the outside. You're also on the inside as
Exactly.
well. Like,
yes.
it's unbearable.
Yes, exactly. And again, as we said before, this isn't just a sort of 21st century sensibility operating here, because, as we said, the people in the men in the play who comment unnecessarily or irrelevantly on
That's right, you use that word fair.
Yes, are basically Lucio, who he's Lucio.
Yeah, he'll have sex with anything that moves.
That's right. And the Duke. Oh, and Angela, of course. Who calls Isabella a fair maid from the start, doesn't he?
Yeah, we don't see like Aeschylus or the provost.
No.
Addressing
Or
these
Claudio.
young women this way. Yeah. Exactly.
The goodness that's cheap in beauty makes beauty brief in goodness. In other words, it's easy for beautiful people to be good because everything comes to them, but it makes beauty brief in goodness because then they're going to obviously go off and sin with the nearest sailor or something. Um, this is the Duke's wisdom, and it's set up in this rather trite antithetical.
Nobody asked for this. Literally,
No.
nobody asked you for this.
That's right. Well,
So
actually,
not the time.
actually, it's a little like Hamlet talking to Ophelia when he says, you know, "How you fare? Are you honest?" And she says, "Could beauty, my lord, have greater commerce than with honesty? Better commerce than with honesty?" He says, "Well, it used to be that way, but you know, the time has proved it different. In other words, your beauty probably means that you're a whore." What do they say? But grace, being the soul of your complexion, shall keep the body of it ever fair. I don't think that's good theology, is it?
Oh, it's just, and I wish you wouldn't use the word body at all.
No,
Like,
that's right.
creepy old man.
That's right. The assault that Angela has made to you, fortune has conveyed to my understanding. Fortune.
Especially, sorry, I'm not quite done. Especially because he overheard their conversation, you know, sweet sister, let me live, you know, I pray for you to die, all of that.
Yes.
And now he's coming in as though he's the judge of a flipping beauty pageant.
That's right.
Oh, unbearable. And she's in like a nun's outfit as well. Like,
Yes. Well, that might be an added spice.
inappropriate. Oh my gosh. Whew.
That's it. They're playing the game of friar and nun, you know. There was, in Protestant culture, there was a strong suspicion that friars and nuns were basically always at it. You know? There was a pub in central London called the Friar Beating the Nun's Arse.
Charming.
Yes, it's mentioned in a contemporary play about London by Thomas Hayward. Yes, exactly, charming. But well, it's that Protestant belief that a life of contemplation is really a life of idleness, which of course leads to, well, we all know what idleness leads to. The devil makes work for idle hands and so on. So again, he's a bit like our revered Prime Minister. You know, he opens his mouth and lies come out. The assault that Angela has made to you, fortune is conveyed to my understanding, as though just by chance, you know, as though it were by chance that he was overhearing them. And
yeah, that's a
well, it's eavesdropping, as he goes, "Oh, over here."
A thin reason for fortune has made me aware of this. Like,
yes, exactly.
How exactly?
Fortune knocked on the door and gave him a little letter.
Yeah, came in the window a little bit.
Because he didn't overhear them, he is spying on. I think it's, you know. But he's not even going to admit to overhearing them. He keeps it vague. Fortune, oh, okay. But the frailtiest example of what I should wonder at Angela. He's very pompous, isn't he? There's very pompous language here. How do you do to content the substitute and save your brother? So she responds, "I'm now going to resolve him, that is Angelo. I'd rather my brother die by the law than my son should be unlawfully born." Another of those slightly priggish statements from Isabella.
Yeah, making a few leaps of logic here, but I mean, it's not impossible that
well,
it happen.
yeah, that's right. And here's his chance to whip off his cassock, so to speak.
Also, sorry if I may, I feel like she's confusing the moral law with the civil law. With like, my brother died by law, that's civil law only. It's not moral law. Oh, I guess she did think it was moral to kill him at the start.
Well, yeah, but also unlawfully born. It's still, you know, a bastard is in a sense unlawful and they can't inherit and so on.
Okay, alright.
Though of course, she like Angela. It shows, in fact, that she, like Angela, is rejecting the whole folk practice of the troth plighting.
Yeah.
Because, you know, Shakespeare himself, as we know, had a troth plighting so that his first daughter was born 6 months after the wedding, but was perfectly legal because of the troth plighting.
Yeah.
So again, she's being a bit of an absolutist, just to say the least. So, how much is the good Duke deceived Angelo? If ever return, I can speak to him. I will open my lips in vain, or discover his government. Discover meaning reveal, of course. And this is where the Duke has a cue. Look, don't you worry about that. I'm actually the Duke. No, nothing bad is going to happen. I'll look after you.
That would be the moment.
Yeah, that's right. And you'd think, I mean, if you wanted to get into a good book, this would be a good way to do it. But of course, it's not how he works, is it? Really. It would suggest too accurate a kind of perception of human psychology for the Duke. So he offers his remedy. He's got a remedy which most uprighteously, is that even a word?
Good point.
There's upright and
Wouldn't
there's
it?
righteous.
Yeah.
Also, he's protesting a little too much because he's counselling her to go to bed with this man. He's to fornicate, basically. But it's going to be uprighteously do a poor wronged lady a benefit, redeem a brother from the angry law, do no stain to your own gracious person. There we go again.
Oh.
And much pleased.
Doesn't that just mean like grace as in,
Well,
theological grace, or does it also mean like fair? Like,
yeah. Well, your person is your outward appearance.
Oh, a gracious person.
Yeah, person.
Oh my gosh.
That's right. Well, remember Francesca talks about la bella persona that first attracted Paolo.
Yeah, okay. He is unbearable.
He is, isn't he? So this is it. It's wonderful, wonderful plan. He just doesn't mention the fornication bit at this point.
Yeah.
He's a salesman here, He's trying to sell her a used car. He doesn't mention that it hasn't got any brakes yet. Let me hear you speak, Father, she says. I have spirit to do anything that appear not foul in the truth of my spirit. Well, there's the rub, eh?
That's a little bit subjective, isn't it?
The truth of my spirit. Yeah. Do you think she'll...
Appears not foul. Like, how about just
Yeah.
do anything that isn't wrong in
Exactly.
the sight of God?
Exactly.
But just isn't wrong.
Exactly. Because what the Duke is showing himself to be the Machiavellian he clearly is, rather than the sacramental monarch that he hopes he is, or believes he is, maybe.
Yeah.
Because basically saying that, the ends justify the means. These four wonderful ends are make it uprighteous. Such a great word, then. Virtue is bold and goodness never fearful.
Oh, I just noticed there's a footnote in mine that says uprighteously in an upright manner, OED's only citation.
Well, there we are. You
So
can make
this
it up.
is the only time this word has been used that's been recorded in the history of the English language. So yeah, so Shakespeare's made it up.
Yeah, well, but I think the Duke has made it up. I think that's the point.
Oh, Shakespeare makes up a lot of words.
Oh, he
I
does.
guess some of them just didn't catch on.
He does.
But I can see what you mean.
Yeah.
It's
the Duke himself who's coming up with this over-the-top word. It's both upright and righteous. And in fact, there's a little joke there because fornication is not something you do when you're upright.
well, other things can be upright.
Yes, exactly.
We're thinking like Shakespeare now.
That's right.
It's not a pretty place.
That's right. Yeah. Incidentally, your useless word for the day, we call such words nonce words, Nonce. A nonce word is a word that occurs only once in the history of the language, on occasion. So there we are. For the nonce, which means for the occasion. So, he's still not telling her exactly what's involved in this deal, but he brings up the subject of Mariana, the sister of Frederick, the great soldier who miscarried at sea. Miscarried means his ship sank, of course. And the Duke explains that she was in fact engaged to Angelo, and the nuptial was appointed, the marriage was appointed, but before it could happen, her brother Frederick was wrecked at sea. And this is pure exposition, of course. There's nothing subtle or interesting or complex here. And took her dowry with him. In other words, the money that should have come with Mariana to Angelo on the marriage. But what happens is that she loses her brother, just as Isabella is about to apparently lose her brother. but with him the portion and sinew of her fortune, her marriage dowry, and with both her competent husband, this well-seeming Angelo. Because Angelo, since she's not any longer going to produce money,
Yeah.
he abandons her.
You don't come with the money.
That's right. That's right.
I don't.
Left her.
Marriage.
That's right. It's a bit like in King Lear, where Cordelia, having lost her inheritance of part of England, the Duke of France wants nothing more to do with her. Sorry, I beg your pardon, the Duke of Burgundy wants nothing more to do with her. The King of France says, you know, I want you anyway because I want you, not your money. Takes her away. True love.
I wonder though, like, you know, in this day and age, are his actions so despicable? Because, I mean, if they had been lovers, then yes, that's terrible. But if it had just been one of those contractual things, like, oh, I've got a daughter, yeah, cool, how much? 50 grand, all right, send her over. Look, money didn't come through, sorry, the deal's off. Like,
well, yes, I suppose so. I suppose so, except that he goes beyond that because he doesn't just, to make himself look good, and to make himself seem less grasping, he actually casts aspersions on her honour.
You're right.
So,
pretending in her discoveries of dishonour.
exactly.
Yeah, okay, so he's a douche.
He is a douche.
Yeah.
Definitely a douche. And he, a marble to her tears, is washed with them but relents not. Of course, that's the Angelo we know. So, it
also says swallowed his vows whole. So they would have had a
Oh, well, yes, careful distinction to be made here. So, what Angelo, Claudio, and Juliet have is a sponsalia per verbo de presenti. In other words, a troth plighting here and now in front of a witness. I will marry you. I want to marry you. We are troth plighted, and that is good to legitimate issue and so on. It's almost marriage.
yeah.
Whereas what they have is a sponsalia per verbo de futuro. That's a conditional.
I will marry you.
I will marry you, provided certain conditions are met.
Yeah, okay.
And so when these conditions aren't met, he's within his legal right to call it off. But a legal right isn't the same as a moral right, if you like. But of course, legal matters are all that Angelo understands. He doesn't really understand a kind of morality that's distinct from legal distinction.
Well, he does enough to save his reputation, though. He's
Oh,
not
yeah.
just so robotic in that he's like, I don't care what you people think, didn't get my money, no marriage, done, whatever. He cares what people think.
Oh, yeah.
He goes to the effort of spreading rumours about her and ruining her reputation, which would have ruined her for anyone else, for any other marriage prospects, in order to make himself look good.
Yeah, that's exactly right. But we kind of know this already because he's told us earlier on that, you know, that my pride, my pomp, which, you know, tell it not, I take pride. My state. In other words, he likes appearing the big man. He likes appearing.
Yes.
And he doesn't want to appear, yes. So, I mean, he's got enough sense to see that looking as though he's throwing her over simply because she hasn't got the money anymore is not a good look.
We're going to look good.
No. So he invents this other reason. And again, it's kind of, I suppose it's legal, but it's not very moral. So he's being a very clever salesman. He's working her up to want to help Mariana. You know, it's one of the outcomes of this marvelous scheme. So a bit like Angelo, he's backing her into a corner where it's going to be very difficult for her to refuse. As I say, a clever salesman. She says, what a merry work and death to take this poor maid from the world, what corruption in this life that will let this man live. But how out of this can she avail? And he says it's a rupture that you may easily heal. A very attractive offer. And the cure of it only saves your brother, but keeps you from dishonour in doing it. Ooh. I'm not sure about that.
I'm just aware of the time.
Oh.
But I think we can finish this off because there's no...
No, there's no... We'll finish this scene.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So basically what he's saying is if they're going to perform a bed trick, which is quite a popular device in
Yes.
early modern drama.
Yeah.
So basically, Isabella's going to be like, "Yep, Angelo, I'll sleep with her. Let's do it. This night, this time, this place. No talking, no lights. Bang. See you then." And then they're going to send Mariana in instead, and Angelo's going to think it's Isabella. That way, her brother will be saved because she's supposedly done the deed, kept up her side of the bargain. And then in the morning, they can switch on the lights and be like, "It was Mariana. Now you've slept with her. You have to marry her." And
Exactly.
all will be well. Mariana will get her husband, Angelo will get his comeuppance, Claudia will be free, and Isabella's chastity will be safe.
Exactly.
Interestingly,
I just addendum to that. Actual consummation of the sponsoria per verbo de futuro between Angelo and Mariana is not fornication, because it's one of the conditions that turns that into a real marriage. So in other words, it's technically not illegal or immoral. So there's.
Is there a bit of hypocrisy here with Isabella though, because she called her brother's sexual relations with Juliet a sin and immoral, and he really it's fine for him to die. But then he's like, "Oh, wonderful plan! I'm so excited to get behind this."
I think
it's like,
to be charitable, we could call it a bit of her learning some flexibility, perhaps.
or there's like a blindness and she just doesn't see.
Well, there's that too.
her
Yeah, there's that
hypocrisy
too.
because it's getting her off the hook.
Yes, no, I
When
think
she's
probably.
literally participating in something that she's so strongly condemned before, in the case of her brother.
That's right. And just the doubleness of the benefit, he says, defends the deceit from reproof. Again, a Machiavellian point of view, I suppose, in a way. The end justifies the means. One thing about this bed trick, it occurs elsewhere in Shakespeare, and it occurs in The Changeling by Middleton, for example. And it depends on the convention. It's just like the convention that you can't tell Clark Kent is Superman when he takes his glasses off or something. It's absurd, really. A simple disguise. Here, the idea is that a man can't distinguish women in bed in the dark because all women are the same. There's a sort of underlying misogynistic tone to it.
Yeah.
But it's very interesting. In The Changeling, it's used in a particular way, and I think there may be an element of this here. The husband is deceived on the wedding night because the wife is no longer a virgin and he doesn't know that. So she sends her maid in to stand in for her. And what it makes is the point that's also made elsewhere in the play, that although he thinks he loves her, in fact he only desires her. So if he loved her, he would know her even in the dark, but since he only desires her as a body, then all bodies are interchangeable. All cats are grey in the dark, as they used to say. So the bed trick, it's a plot device, it's a convention, but it does have an underlying moral purpose. And remember we were saying earlier on that it almost feels like a kind of love he feels for Isabella, I desire to see her again, feast upon her eyes. But love individuates and understands the other person, and is not going to be deceived by a bed trick. But mere lust, well, anybody will do.
Yeah, and then we'll see, his behaviour after the bed trick as well. He clearly doesn't love Isabella, unfortunately. There seemed potential for it, but Angela has ruined that. And also, to be fair to Isabella, is here as well, the Duke is dressed as a friar the entire time that he's advising her to do this.
Yes,
so he does
it is fair.
pretend to have that moral authority, and she thinks
That's
that
right.
he has that. So
Yeah, exactly.
to end it.
Okay.
Like and subscribe.